Chapter 1. The House That Never Sleeps. In the heart of San Jose, California, beneath the soft glow of modern streetlights, stands a Victorian mansion that defies all logic and reason. 7 stories rise into the California night sky, their silhouettes jagged and irregular against the stars. This is the Winchester Mystery House, where for 38 years the sound of hammers and saws never ceased, where construction continued around the clock, every single day, as if driven by some invisible, relentless force. Step closer to its weathered walls and you'll notice something unsettling. Windows peer into empty air, 3 stories above the ground with no balcony or platform beneath them. Doors open directly onto walls as if the builders forgot that rooms should connect to hallways, not solid plaster. Staircases spiral upward with obsessive precision, only to end abruptly at a ceiling, leading nowhere but into frustration and bewilderment. This house, sprawling across 4.5 acres, contains 160 rooms, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, and 47 fireplaces. Yet it was built without any architectural plans, without blueprints, without any grand design save the fevered imagination of one woman who could never stop building. The woman was Sarah Winchester, heir to a fortune built on precision engineering and deadly efficiency. The Winchester rifle, known as the gun that won the West, had made her family unimaginably wealthy. But with that wealth came something else, something that would haunt Sarah for the rest of her life. According to the stories whispered through the corridors of this strange house, Sarah believed she was cursed, pursued by the restless spirits of everyone who had ever fallen to a Winchester rifle. The only way to keep them at bay, she supposedly believed, was to never stop building, never stop creating new rooms and passages where these spirits could dwell without bringing harm to her. Whether you believe in such supernatural motivations or not, the house itself stands as undeniable proof of something extraordinary. From 1884 until 1922, construction never stopped. Not on Sundays, not on holidays, not during the great San Francisco earthquake of 1906 that damaged parts of the structure. The hammering continued through Sarah's grief, through her isolation, through decades of whispered speculation from the people of San Jose who watched this architectural marvel grow ever stranger and more complex. Walk through its halls today, and you'll experience the disorientation that Sarah's guests must have felt. Corridors that seemed to lead somewhere suddenly curve back on themselves. Beautiful, intricate woodwork adorns rooms that serve no apparent purpose. Cabinets are built into walls at head height, impossible to reach without a ladder. There are stairs with risers only 2 inches high, designed, some say, to accommodate Sarah's arthritis as she aged. Others whisper they were built to confuse the spirits that might be following her footsteps through the endless maze of her creation. The house has 13 bathrooms, a number that appears repeatedly throughout the structure with almost obsessive frequency. 13 windows in certain rooms, 13 panels in doors, 13 steps in some staircases. Whether this was intentional symbolism, architectural coincidence, or something more mysterious remains one of the many questions that the Winchester Mystery House poses to its visitors. During Sarah Winchester's lifetime, the house employed a small army of carpenters, craftsmen, and servants. They worked in shifts around the clock, creating what would become one of California's most puzzling landmarks. The workers, many of whom lived on the property, reported strange experiences: footsteps in empty hallways, whispered voices in rooms under construction, the feeling of being watched as they hammered and sawed through the long California nights. But the Winchester Mystery House is more than just its architectural oddities and supernatural reputation. It represents something uniquely American, a monument to both immense wealth and profound guilt, to the power of obsession and the lengths one person will go to find peace in a world that seems hostile to their very existence. Sarah Winchester, small in stature but enormous in determination, created something that has captivated imaginations for more than a century. The house sits in what was once the countryside south of San Francisco, surrounded by orchards and farmland. Sarah chose this location deliberately, far from the social circles of San Francisco and San Jose, where she could build in private, away from prying eyes and gossiping tongues. The property she purchased was substantial, giving her room to expand in any direction her architectural visions might take her. And expand she did, creating a structure so complex that even today, armed with modern floor plans and guided tours, visitors regularly become lost in its labyrinthine passages. The Victorian era, when Sarah began her construction project, was a time of spiritual exploration and communication with the dead. Séances were fashionable entertainment in wealthy households, and mediums claimed to bridge the gap between the living and the departed. Whether Sarah Winchester genuinely believed in such practices, or simply found comfort in their rituals, remains a matter of historical speculation. What is documented is her increasing reclusiveness, her dedication to the construction project, and her apparent belief that the work must continue. Some historians suggest more practical motivations for the endless construction. Sarah Winchester was a wealthy widow in an era when women had few, socially acceptable ways to spend their time and energy. Building provided her with purpose, with daily decisions to make and problems to solve. The complexity of the house may have been less about confusing spirits and more about challenging herself intellectually, creating puzzles and architectural experiments that kept her mind engaged during long years of mourning and isolation. Yet the more rational explanations don't fully account for some of the house's most bizarre features. Why build a staircase that leads to a ceiling? Why install a door that opens 3 stories above the ground with nothing beyond it but empty air? Why create rooms within rooms, accessible only through hidden passages? These elements suggest something beyond mere eccentricity or intellectual exercise. They speak to a mind either touched by genuine supernatural belief or driven by psychological forces that mere logic cannot explain. The earthquake of 1906 provided a dramatic chapter in the house's history. When the Great Tremor struck the San Francisco Bay Area, portions of the Winchester house collapsed. Sarah Winchester was trapped in her bedroom for several hours until workers could free her from the debris. Rather than taking this as a sign to stop building, she interpreted the earthquake differently. She ordered that the damaged sections be sealed off rather than repaired, and construction resumed immediately in other areas of the house. To this day, rooms remain exactly as they were left after the earthquake, preserved like a time capsule of that terrifying morning. The legend of the Winchester Mystery House has grown in the telling, with each generation adding new layers of supernatural explanation to its already mysterious architecture. Psychics and paranormal investigators have claimed to encounter spirits throughout the property. Tour guides share stories passed down through decades of employees. Visitors report unexplained phenomena ranging from cold spots to moving shadows to the sound of phantom footsteps echoing through empty rooms. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Winchester Mystery House is not its ghostly reputation, but its human story. Sarah Winchester, a woman of considerable intelligence and unlimited financial resources, chose to spend nearly 4 decades of her life creating this architectural puzzle. Whether driven by grief, guilt, supernatural belief, or simple creative obsession, she left behind a structure that continues to fascinate and perplex visitors more than a century after her death. If you're enjoying this journey through one of America's most mysterious houses, I'd love for you to subscribe to Sleepy Side Stories. Your support helps us continue exploring these fascinating tales that blur the line between history and legend, bringing you the strange and wonderful stories that make perfect companions for peaceful sleep. As we delve deeper into the story of Sarah Winchester and her remarkable house, we'll explore the origins of the Winchester fortune, the family tragedies that shaped Sarah's worldview, and the specific events that led her to purchase 8 acres of farmland in San Jose and begin the most unusual construction project in American history. We'll examine the documented facts behind the legend, separating verified historical events from the folklore that has grown up around this extraordinary woman and her impossible house. The Winchester Mystery House stands today as a testament to human complexity, to the ways that wealth, loss, and perhaps supernatural belief can combine to create something unprecedented in American architecture. Its rooms hold secrets that may never be fully understood. Its passages wind through questions that have no simple answers. But in the quiet of a California evening, when the tour groups have gone home and the last visitors have departed, the house settles into itself with the weight of its own strange history, keeping its mysteries safe for another night, another day, another generation of curious souls who wonder what drives a person to build a house that never ends. Chapter 2. The Winchester Fortune. To understand the woman who would build America's most mysterious house, we must first understand the fortune that made it possible. The Winchester name was not born from old money or inherited estates, but from precision engineering and the brutal realities of 19th century American expansion. The story begins not with Sarah Winchester, but with Oliver Winchester, a man whose business acumen would create one of the most successful firearms companies in American history. Oliver Fisher Winchester was born in 1810 in Boston, Massachusetts. He began his career far from the world of firearms, working as a shirt manufacturer in New Haven, Connecticut. Winchester possessed the keen business sense that would later make his family fortune, but his initial success came from clothing, not weapons. He invested wisely, expanded carefully, and by the 1840s had built a profitable textile business that provided him with the capital to pursue other opportunities. The opportunity that would change everything came in 1857, when Winchester learned of a struggling firearms company called the Volcanic Repeating Arms Company. The company had been founded on innovative designs for repeating rifles and pistols, but poor management and limited capital had brought it to the brink of bankruptcy. Winchester saw potential where others saw failure. He purchased the company's assets, including its patents and designs, for a fraction of what they would eventually be worth. Winchester's timing was extraordinary. America was on the verge of its most devastating internal conflict, and the demand for firearms would soon explode beyond anything the country had previously experienced. But Winchester's genius lay not just in recognizing this opportunity, but in understanding that success would depend on more than just making guns. He would need to make the right guns, manufactured efficiently, and marketed effectively to the right customers. The key to Winchester's success was his partnership with Benjamin Tyler Henry, a brilliant gunsmith and inventor who had previously worked for the Volcanic Company. Henry had been developing improvements to the lever-action repeating rifle design, creating a weapon that could fire multiple rounds without reloading. This was revolutionary technology in an era when most soldiers carried single-shot rifles that required individual loading of powder, wadding, and bullets for each shot. In 1860, Winchester reorganized his company as the New Haven Arms Company, with Henry as his chief designer. The timing could not have been better. The American Civil War erupted in 1861, and suddenly the United States government needed weapons on a scale never before imagined. Both Union and Confederate forces required rifles, pistols, and ammunition in quantities that challenged the entire American manufacturing system. The Henry rifle, as it came to be known, represented a quantum leap in personal firearms technology. A trained soldier could fire the Henry's 16 rounds in under a minute, while his opponent with a traditional rifle might manage 3 or 4 shots in the same time. Confederate soldiers facing these weapons on the battlefield reportedly called them that damned Yankee rifle you can load on Sunday and shoot all week. The psychological impact was as significant as the tactical advantage. Winchester's business expanded rapidly during the war years. The company produced thousands of rifles for Union forces, but Winchester's true brilliance lay in his long-term vision. While other manufacturers focused solely on military contracts, Winchester began planning for the post-war market. He understood that when the conflict ended, thousands of soldiers would return home to a country still expanding westward, where reliable firearms would remain essential for hunting, protection, and survival. After the Civil War ended in 1865, Winchester reorganized once again, this time establishing the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. The new company focused on civilian markets, particularly the needs of settlers, hunters, and lawmen heading into the American frontier. The Winchester rifle became synonymous with Western expansion, earning its famous nickname, the gun that won the West. The post-war years brought Winchester unprecedented success. The company's rifles were renowned for their reliability, accuracy, and innovative design. Winchester invested heavily in marketing, creating advertisements that portrayed his rifles as essential tools for American pioneers. The company sponsored shooting competitions, provided weapons to famous marksmen like Annie Oakley, and cultivated relationships with military leaders and politicians who could influence government contracts. By the 1870s, Winchester rifles were being used throughout the American West by settlers, soldiers, lawmen, and unfortunately, outlaws as well. The weapons were equally effective in the hands of those enforcing the law and those breaking it. Native American tribes, initially armed primarily with traditional weapons, increasingly acquired Winchester rifles through trade, capture, or purchase, adding another layer of complexity to the ongoing conflicts of Western expansion. Oliver Winchester's personal life was marked by the same careful planning that characterized his business ventures. In 1834, he married Jane Ellen Hope, and together they built a family that would inherit not only his wealth, but also the moral complexities that came with it. Their son, William Wirt Winchester, was born in 1837 and groomed from childhood to eventually take over the family business. William Winchester proved himself capable of continuing his father's work. He was educated at Yale College, where he distinguished himself academically and socially. After graduation, he joined the family business, learning every aspect of rifle manufacturing, from design and production to marketing and sales. William possessed his father's business acumen, but with a gentler temperament that made him popular among employees and business partners alike. It was during this period of Winchester family prosperity that William met Sarah Lockwood Pardee. Sarah was born on September 30th, 1839 in New Haven, Connecticut, into a family that, while not as wealthy as the Winchesters, was well established and respected in local society. The Pardee family had deep roots in Connecticut, with ancestors who had arrived in America during the early colonial period. Sarah's father, Leonard Pardee, was a successful carriage maker, a trade that required both craftsmanship and business skill. Sarah Pardee was considered an exceptional young woman by the standards of her time. She was well educated, having attended private schools that provided her with accomplishments uncommon among women of the era. She was fluent in multiple languages, including French, Italian, Spanish, and Latin. She was also musically talented, playing piano with considerable skill. Most remarkably, for a woman of the 1850s, Sarah had an interest in architecture and construction, knowledge that would prove crucial to her later endeavours. The courtship between William Winchester and Sarah Pardee was lengthy by modern standards, but typical for their social class and era. They were introduced through mutual friends in New Haven social circles, and their relationship developed over several years of supervised meetings, family gatherings, and social events. Both families approved of the match, seeing it as beneficial not only to the young couple, but to their respective business and social interests. William and Sarah were married on September 30th, 1862, Sarah's 23rd birthday. The wedding was a significant social event in New Haven, reflecting the Winchester family's growing prominence and wealth. The ceremony was held at the First Congregational Church, with a reception afterward at the Pardee family home. Contemporary newspaper accounts describe it as an elegant affair, attended by members of Connecticut's business and political elite. The early years of Sarah and William's marriage were marked by happiness and prosperity. The Civil War was bringing unprecedented profits to the Winchester Company, and William was taking an increasingly active role in its management. Oliver Winchester was aging and gradually transferring more responsibilities to his son, confident that the family business would continue to thrive under William's leadership. Sarah adapted well to her role as the wife of a prominent businessman. She participated in the social activities expected of women in her position, including charity work and social gatherings. But according to family friends and contemporary accounts, Sarah was not content with a purely decorative role. She took genuine interest in her husband's work, and was known to ask detailed questions about rifle design and manufacturing processes. This curiosity about mechanical and architectural matters would later become central to her life's work. The Winchester fortune continued to grow throughout the 1860s. Oliver Winchester's vision of a post-war civilian market proved remarkably accurate. As American settlers pushed westward, Winchester rifles became essential equipment for survival in frontier conditions. The company's reputation for quality and reliability made Winchester the preferred brand among professional hunters, ranchers, and anyone whose life might depend on their weapons' performance. However, success in the firearms industry came with an unavoidable moral burden. Every Winchester rifle sold represented potential for both protection and destruction. The same weapon that helped a homesteader defend his family could be used by an outlaw to rob a bank, or by soldiers to kill enemy combatants. The Winchester family was aware of this duality, but like most successful industrialists of their era, they focused on the legitimate uses of their products while avoiding difficult questions about their potential for harm. By 1866, 4 years after their marriage, William and Sarah Winchester had established themselves as one of New Haven's most prominent young couples. William was effectively running much of the day-to-day operations of Winchester Repeating Arms, while Oliver Winchester focused on strategic planning and major business decisions. The family's wealth had grown to extraordinary proportions, making them among the richest families in Connecticut and providing them with virtually unlimited financial resources. Sarah Winchester seemed to have everything a woman of her era could desire: a loving husband, substantial wealth, social position, and the respect of her community. She lived in a beautiful home, employed several servants, and could afford any luxury or comfort she might want. Yet those who knew her well noted that Sarah possessed a restless intelligence that seemed constantly searching for new challenges and interests. The Winchester rifles continued to play their role in the ongoing transformation of America. The weapons were used in the Indian Wars, the ongoing conflicts between white settlers and Native American tribes fighting to preserve their traditional lands and ways of life. Winchester rifles were carried by cavalry soldiers, frontiersmen, and civilians caught in the violence that characterized much of the Western expansion period. Each conflict added to the Winchester Company's profits, while also adding to the growing tally of lives lost to Winchester firearms. As the 1860s drew to a close, the Winchester family appeared to be at the pinnacle of American success. Oliver Winchester had built a business empire from nothing. William was proving himself a worthy successor, and Sarah seemed perfectly positioned to enjoy a life of comfort and social prominence. The future looked bright, filled with continued prosperity and family happiness. None of them could have anticipated the tragedies that would soon transform Sarah Winchester's life and set her on a path toward building one of America's most mysterious houses. The foundation had been laid, however, for everything that would follow. The Winchester fortune, built on precision engineering and deadly efficiency, would provide the resources for Sarah's extraordinary architectural project. Her education and intelligence would enable her to direct complex construction efforts. Her growing isolation from conventional society would give her the freedom to build according to her own strange vision. All the elements were in place for the creation of the Winchester Mystery House, though no one could have predicted the personal losses that would drive Sarah Winchester to begin her lifelong construction project. Chapter 3: Journey to California. The happiness that had defined Sarah Winchester's early married life began to crumble in the spring of 1866. On June 15th of that year, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Annie Pardee Winchester. The birth should have been a moment of joy for the Winchester family, the beginning of a new generation to inherit the growing firearms fortune. Instead, it marked the start of a series of tragedies that would forever alter the course of Sarah's life. Annie Winchester was born with a condition that 19th century medicine could neither properly diagnose nor effectively treat. Contemporary medical records, such as they exist, suggest the infant suffered from what would today likely be recognized as a severe genetic disorder affecting multiple organ systems. The baby was weak from birth, unable to nurse properly, and failed to gain weight as healthy infants should. Despite the best medical care that the Winchester fortune could provide, little Annie lived only 43 days, dying on July 28, 1866. The loss of their only child devastated both William and Sarah Winchester. but it affected them in markedly different ways. William, following the emotional patterns expected of men in his social class and era, threw himself into his work with the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. The business demands provided him with a structured way to channel his grief while maintaining his public responsibilities. Sarah, however, had no such outlet. Victorian society offered grieving mothers few acceptable ways to express their anguish beyond private mourning and gradual return to social obligations. According to family friends and contemporary accounts, Sarah's grief was profound and lasting. She withdrew from many of the social activities that had previously occupied her time. She spent long hours alone in the nursery that had been prepared for Annie, surrounded by the baby clothes, toys and furniture that would never be used. Friends noted that Sarah seemed to age years in the months following Annie's death, her previously vibrant personality becoming subdued and inward-focused. The Winchester family hoped that time would heal Sarah's emotional wounds, and for several years it seemed that she was gradually recovering from her loss. She resumed some social activities and appeared to be adapting to life without the child she had so briefly held. However, those closest to her observed that Sarah had changed fundamentally. She developed what contemporary observers described as a heightened sensitivity to suffering and an increased interest in spiritual matters that bordered on obsession with death and the afterlife. William Winchester, meanwhile, continued his successful management of the family firearms business. Under his leadership, Winchester Repeating Arms expanded its product line and increased its market share throughout the American West. The company's rifles were now standard equipment for cavalry units, lawmen, hunters, and settlers. Sales figures from the late 1860s and early 1870s show remarkable growth, with Winchester rifles being shipped to every state and territory in the expanding nation. But success in business could not shield William from personal tragedy. In 1880, 15 years after the death of their daughter, William Winchester began showing symptoms of what physicians diagnosed as pulmonary tuberculosis. The disease, which was often called consumption in that era, was one of the leading causes of death in 19th century America. Despite advances in medical understanding, tuberculosis remained largely untreatable, with patients typically experiencing a slow decline over months or years. William's illness progressed steadily through 1880 and into 1881. The Winchester family consulted with the best physicians available, seeking treatments and cures from medical experts in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. They tried various remedies popular at the time, including changes in climate, dietary modifications, and experimental medications. Nothing proved effective against the relentless progression of the disease. On March 7, 1881, William Wirt Winchester died at the age of 43, leaving Sarah a widow at 41. His death marked the end of direct Winchester family involvement in the firearms company that bore their name. Oliver Winchester had died in 1880, just 1 year before his son, and with William's passing, control of Winchester Repeating Arms passed to other family members and business partners. Sarah Winchester now found herself in an unusual position for a woman of her era. She was extraordinarily wealthy, with an inheritance that included not only a substantial lump sum, but also a daily income from Winchester Company stock that amounted to approximately $1,000 per day. To put this in perspective, the average American worker in 1881 earned less than $500 per year. Sarah's daily income exceeded what most families saw in 2 years of labor. The wealth brought Sarah financial independence that few women of her time could imagine, but it also brought isolation and a burden of responsibility that she seemed unprepared to handle. She had no children to provide purpose for her wealth, no husband to share decisions about its use, and no clear role in society for a woman of her unusual circumstances. The Winchester Company continued to generate enormous profits, and Sarah continued to receive her share of those profits, regardless of how the weapons were used or who might be harmed by them. According to legend, it was during this period of grief and isolation that Sarah Winchester first consulted a medium. The story, which cannot be verified through contemporary documents, but has become central to the Winchester Mystery House mythology, claims that Sarah sought spiritual guidance about her losses and her future. The medium supposedly told Sarah that she was cursed, haunted by the spirits of all those killed by Winchester rifles, and that the deaths of her husband and daughter were manifestations of this supernatural vengeance. The legend continues that the medium advised Sarah to move west, to find a place where she could build a home for these restless spirits. The construction must never stop, the medium allegedly warned, because as long as building continued, the spirits would be appeased, and Sarah would be safe from their wrath. If the construction ever ceased, the spirits would claim Sarah's life as payment for the deaths caused by Winchester firearms. Whether Sarah Winchester actually received such advice from a medium, or whether this story was created later to explain her subsequent behaviour, remains uncertain. What is documented is that Sarah did indeed decide to leave Connecticut in 1884, 3 years after William's death. She sold the family home in New Haven and began making arrangements to relocate to California, a decision that surprised her friends and remaining family members. California in the 1880s was still very much a frontier region, particularly the area around San Jose where Sarah would eventually settle. The state had been part of the Union for only 34 years, and much of its development had been driven by the gold rush of the 1840s and 50s. San Jose itself was a small agricultural community surrounded by fruit orchards and farmland, quite different from the established society and cultural amenities that Sarah had known in Connecticut. Sarah's decision to move to California may have been influenced by the climate, which physicians often recommended for people suffering from various ailments, particularly respiratory conditions. California's dry, warm weather was thought to be beneficial for those with tuberculosis, arthritis, and other chronic conditions. Sarah had developed rheumatoid arthritis, possibly exacerbated by the stress and grief of her recent losses, and the California climate might have offered some relief from her symptoms. In 1884, Sarah Winchester travelled by train from Connecticut to California, a journey that took several days and represented a complete break from her previous life. She was 44 years old, recently widowed, childless, and extraordinarily wealthy. She carried with her not only substantial financial resources, but also the burden of a fortune built on weapons that had taken countless lives across the American frontier. Upon arriving in California, Sarah spent several months exploring different areas before deciding on the Santa Clara Valley, the region around San Jose. The area appealed to her for several reasons beyond its climate. It was relatively isolated from major urban centres, providing the privacy that she seemed to crave. The land was fertile and beautiful, with orchards and farms stretching across valley floors surrounded by rolling hills. Most importantly, property was available in large parcels at reasonable prices, giving Sarah the space she would need for whatever project she had in mind. In September 1884, Sarah Winchester purchased a modest 8-room farmhouse and the surrounding 160 acres from a local physician, Dr. Robert Caldwell. The property was located in what was then the countryside south of San Jose, surrounded by apricot and prune orchards that were typical of the region's agricultural economy. The farmhouse itself was unremarkable, a simple 2-story structure built in the 1860s to serve the practical needs of a farming family. The purchase price was reported to be approximately $12,000, a substantial sum but hardly a significant expense for someone of Sarah's wealth. What made the transaction notable was not the cost, but Sarah's apparent plans for the property. Local residents later recalled that she asked detailed questions about building permits, construction regulations, and the availability of skilled carpenters and craftsmen in the area. Dr. Caldwell, who sold Sarah the property, later provided one of the few contemporary accounts of her initial plans. According to Caldwell, Sarah spoke of wanting to expand the farmhouse to better accommodate her needs as a permanent resident of California. She mentioned wanting additional rooms for guests, though she seemed to have few friends or family members who might visit. She also expressed interest in creating workshops and storage areas, though she did not specify what she intended to store or what type of work she planned to do. What Dr. Caldwell and other local residents could not have anticipated was the scale of Sarah Winchester's building plans. When she spoke of expansion and renovation, they likely imagined the typical improvements that wealthy new residents made to rural properties, perhaps doubling the size of the house, adding modern conveniences, landscaping the grounds. None of them envisioned a construction project that would continue for 38 years and create one of the most bizarre architectural achievements in American history. Sarah Winchester settled into her new California home in late 1884, but she did not settle into a quiet retirement as her neighbours might have expected. Almost immediately she began interviewing local carpenters, contractors and craftsmen. She placed orders for lumber, hardware and building supplies that seemed excessive for any normal renovation project. Within weeks of taking possession of the property, the sound of hammering and sawing began to echo across the Santa Clara Valley, starting a construction symphony that would continue without interruption until Sarah's death 38 years later. The transformation of the simple farmhouse into the Winchester Mystery House had begun. Sarah Winchester, armed with unlimited financial resources and apparently driven by forces that her neighbours could not understand, commenced the most extraordinary building project in American domestic architecture. Whether motivated by grief, guilt, supernatural belief, or simply an obsessive need to stay busy, she embarked on a construction endeavour that would challenge every conventional notion of how houses should be designed and built. Local residents watched with growing amazement as the modest farmhouse began to sprout new rooms, wings and stories with bewildering speed. Wagons loaded with lumber arrived daily. Teams of carpenters worked in shifts around the clock. The sound of construction became as much a part of the local soundscape as birdsong or wind through the orchard trees. Sarah Winchester had found her purpose in California, and that purpose was to build continuously and without end, creating a house that would become synonymous with mystery, obsession, and the strange ways that wealth and grief can combine to create something unprecedented in human experience. Chapter 4. The construction begins. The hammering started before dawn on October 1st, 1884, just days after Sarah Winchester took possession of her California property. Local residents later recalled being awakened by the rhythmic sound of construction echoing across the valley in the pre-dawn darkness. This was not the occasional weekend project or seasonal renovation that characterized most rural building efforts. This was systematic, continuous professional construction that operated on a schedule unlike anything the farming community had previously experienced. Sarah Winchester had wasted no time in assembling a construction crew. Within a week of purchasing the property, she had hired a foreman, Charles Davis, who would oversee the building project for the next several years. Davis was an experienced carpenter and contractor who had worked on some of the larger construction projects in the San Jose area. He was known for his reliability, his skill with complex carpentry, and his ability to manage crews of workers efficiently. What made Davis's new job unusual was not the quality of work expected, but the schedule and the apparent lack of overall building plans. Sarah Winchester met with Davis daily, sometimes multiple times per day, to discuss the next phase of construction. Rather than presenting him with architectural drawings or blueprints for a completed house, she would describe individual rooms, hallways, or features that she wanted added to the existing structure. Davis would then translate her verbal descriptions into practical construction plans. The initial construction focused on expanding the existing 8-room farmhouse in relatively conventional ways. Sarah ordered the addition of several bedrooms, a larger kitchen, and reception areas suitable for entertaining guests. These early modifications followed traditional architectural principles and would not have seemed unusual to anyone familiar with how wealthy newcomers typically improved rural properties. The work was high quality, using expensive materials and careful craftsmanship that reflected Sarah's substantial budget. However, even in these early phases, certain peculiarities became apparent to the construction crew. Sarah Winchester insisted that work continue around the clock, with teams of carpenters working in rotating shifts to ensure that some construction activity was always taking place on the property. This required maintaining supplies of lumber, nails, and other materials at levels far beyond what any normal building project would require. It also meant providing lighting for night work, which was unusual and expensive in an era before electric power. The workers, most of whom were local men familiar with conventional building practices, found themselves adapting to Sarah Winchester's unusual requirements. She demanded precise measurements and high-quality finish work, but she also insisted on modifications that seemed to serve no practical purpose. Rooms were built and then immediately subdivided, doorways were framed and then sealed up before any doors were installed. Staircases were constructed and then modified repeatedly until their original purpose became unclear. Charles Davis later told local newspaper reporters that Mrs. Winchester seemed to possess an unusual knowledge of construction techniques for someone who had never worked in the building trades. She understood the structural requirements for supporting additional floors, the proper spacing for floor joists, and the engineering principles necessary for building staircases and archways. This knowledge may have come from her childhood interest in her father's carriage-making business, which required similar understanding of structural engineering and precise craftsmanship. By the end of 1884, just 3 months after construction began, the modest farmhouse had grown to 15 rooms. The expansion included not only additional living spaces, but also storage areas, workshops, and rooms whose purpose was unclear even to the workers building them. Sarah Winchester had already established the pattern that would define the next 38 years, continuous construction driven by daily decisions rather than long-term architectural planning. The local community's initial reaction to Sarah Winchester's building project was curiosity mixed with admiration. Wealthy newcomers often made improvements to their properties, and the quality of workmanship and materials being used suggested that Mrs. Winchester had both excellent taste and substantial financial resources. The around-the-clock schedule was unusual, but it provided employment for local craftsmen and brought money into the regional economy. However, as the construction continued into 1885 and beyond, the nature of the project began to generate more questions than answers. Visitors to the property, including delivery drivers, tradesmen, and occasional social callers, reported that the house seemed to be growing in random directions without any apparent master plan. Wings extended from the original structure at odd angles. New stories were added above existing rooms without regard for the overall proportions of the building. Sarah Winchester's daily routine during this period was described by her household staff and construction workers as highly regimented, but focused entirely on the building project. She rose early each morning and spent several hours walking through the house, examining the previous day's work and planning the next phase of construction. She carried a notebook in which she sketched room layouts and recorded measurements, though these notes were apparently never compiled into comprehensive building plans. The interaction between Sarah and her construction crews was formal, but respectful. Workers reported that she treated them fairly, paid wages promptly, and provided good working conditions including meals and break areas. However, she maintained strict oversight of all construction activities and frequently requested modifications to work that had already been completed. Rooms might be built according to her specifications, only to have her order changes to the ceiling height, window placement, or interior walls. By 1886, 2 years after construction began, the Winchester house had grown to more than 30 rooms spread across multiple stories and connected by an increasingly complex network of hallways and staircases. The original farmhouse was still recognizable at the core of the structure, but it was now surrounded and overshadowed by additions that had transformed the property into something unprecedented in domestic architecture. It was during this period that the first legends about Sarah Winchester's motivations for continuous construction began to circulate in the local community. The stories varied in their details, but most centered on the idea that Mrs. Winchester was building to appease supernatural forces connected to the Winchester rifle fortune. Some versions suggested that she was haunted by the ghosts of people killed by Winchester firearms and that the construction was intended to provide them with dwelling places. Other local legends proposed that Sarah Winchester had been told by mediums or spiritualists that she would live as long as construction continued on her house, but would die if the building ever stopped. This version of the story explained both the continuous nature of the construction and its apparently random character. If the goal was simply to keep building rather than to create a functional living space, then the architectural oddities made a certain kind of sense. These supernatural explanations for the Winchester construction project cannot be verified through contemporary documents, but they reflect the community's attempts to understand behaviour that seemed inexplicable by conventional standards. Sarah Winchester was clearly intelligent, wealthy, and capable of making rational decisions about other aspects of her life. Yet she was directing a building project that appeared to follow no logical architectural principles and served no apparent practical purpose beyond the act of construction itself. What is documented is that Sarah Winchester did develop an interest in spiritualism during her California years. The late 19th century was a period of intense fascination with communication between the living and the dead, and California was home to numerous mediums, psychics, and spiritual advisors who catered to wealthy clients seeking contact with deceased relatives. Whether Sarah's interest in these practices preceded her construction project or developed as a way to rationalize it remains unclear. The Winchester House continued to grow throughout the 1880s, with new rooms, corridors, and features being added at a pace that amazed local observers. By 1888, the structure had expanded to include more than 60 rooms arranged in a configuration that defied easy description. Visitors frequently became lost in the maze of interconnected spaces, and even household staff needed time to learn the layout of their workplace. The construction methods employed by Sarah Winchester's crews were conventional, but their application was increasingly unusual. High-quality hardwoods were used throughout the house, including expensive imported materials that had to be shipped from distant suppliers. The craftsmanship was consistently excellent, with intricate woodwork, detailed mouldings, and precise joinery that reflected both skilled labour and generous budgets. However, this expensive craftsmanship was often applied to features that seemed to serve no functional purpose. Elaborate staircases were built that led to solid walls or low ceilings. Beautiful hardwood floors were installed in rooms that had no apparent use. Ornate windows were placed in interior walls where they could never admit natural light. The contradiction between the quality of construction and the apparent uselessness of many features added to the growing mystery surrounding the project. Sarah Winchester's household during this period included not only construction workers, but also domestic staff responsible for maintaining the portions of the house that were actually lived in. The servants' quarters were located in a separate section of the growing structure, and Sarah employed cooks, housekeepers, gardeners, and personal attendants. These employees provided some of the few contemporary accounts of daily life in the Winchester house during its construction phase. According to servants' reports, Sarah Winchester maintained a relatively simple personal lifestyle, despite the elaborate construction project surrounding her. She ate modest meals, dressed in practical clothing suitable for walking through construction areas, and kept regular hours focused on overseeing the building work. She received few visitors and seemed to have little interest in the social activities that typically occupied wealthy women of her era. The most striking aspect of Sarah Winchester's routine was her apparent obsession with the construction project itself. She spent hours each day walking through completed sections of the house, examining details of the work and making notes for future modifications. She would frequently order changes to rooms that had just been finished, resulting in constant renovation, alongside new construction. Some areas of the house were reportedly built, demolished, and rebuilt multiple times according to her evolving specifications. By the end of the 1880s, the Winchester House had become a local landmark and tourist curiosity. Travellers passing through the San Jose area would often make detours to see the strange mansion that was perpetually under construction. Local newspapers began publishing articles about the unusual building project, and the story of the Winchester Mystery House started to spread beyond the immediate community. The legends and theories about Sarah Winchester's motivations continued to multiply along with the rooms in her house. Some observers suggested that she was simply eccentric, using her wealth to indulge in an elaborate hobby. Others proposed that the construction served therapeutic purposes, providing her with daily structure and purpose that helped her cope with the grief and isolation of her widowhood. The supernatural explanations remained popular, particularly among those who were fascinated by the spiritualist movement. What remained undeniable was the scope and persistence of the construction project. Sarah Winchester had committed herself to building continuously, employing skilled craftsmen around the clock, and spending enormous sums of money on a house that grew larger and stranger with each passing year. Whether driven by grief, guilt, supernatural belief, or simple obsessive behaviour, she had embarked on an architectural adventure that would continue for decades and create one of America's most mysterious landmarks. The modest farmhouse that she had purchased in 1884 was now barely recognisable within the sprawling, bizarre structure that would eventually become known worldwide as the Winchester Mystery House. Chapter 5. Architectural Impossibilities. As the Winchester House grew through the 1890s, its architectural features became increasingly divorced from any conventional understanding of how buildings should function. What had begun as unusual construction choices evolved into deliberate impossibilities that challenged the very purpose of doors, windows, staircases, and rooms themselves. These features, created through precise craftsmanship but defying practical logic, would become the defining characteristics that transformed Sarah Winchester's home into one of America's most puzzling architectural achievements. The most famous of the Winchester House's architectural oddities are its staircases that lead nowhere. The mansion contains 40 staircases in total, ranging from grand, sweeping constructions with elaborate banisters to narrow service stairs tucked into corners and alcoves. 7 of these staircases terminate abruptly at solid ceilings, with no door, passage, or opening to explain their purpose. The craftsmanship of these dead-end stairs is identical to that of functional staircases throughout the house, suggesting they were not mistakes or unfinished work but deliberate architectural choices. The most striking example is a beautifully crafted staircase in the house's central section that rises gracefully for 13 steps before ending at a ceiling barely 7 feet above the floor. The staircase features hand-carved balusters, polished handrails, and detailed newel posts that match the finest woodwork found anywhere in the mansion. Anyone climbing these stairs would find themselves pressed against the ceiling with no way forward, backward being the only option for descent. Another remarkable staircase begins normally but includes steps of wildly varying heights. Some rises measure only 2 inches, requiring dozens of steps to gain modest elevation, while others rise 7 or 8 inches in a single step. This irregular rhythm creates a disorienting climbing experience that seems designed to confuse rather than facilitate movement between floors. Sarah Winchester, who suffered from arthritis in her later years, may have found the shallow steps easier to navigate, but this doesn't explain the presence of normal height steps mixed randomly throughout the same staircase. The Winchester House's doors present an equally puzzling array of architectural impossibilities. The mansion contains more than 2,000 doors, but many of them serve purposes that defy explanation. Some doors open directly onto solid walls, revealing nothing but plaster and wooden framing where one would expect to find rooms or hallways. Others open onto sheer drops of 15 or 20 feet, with no balcony, platform, or staircase to provide safe passage. One particularly striking example is a door on the second floor that opens onto empty air above the kitchen. The door itself is beautifully crafted, with panels and hardware matching other doors throughout the house, but stepping through it would result in a potentially fatal fall. No evidence suggests this door was ever intended to connect to a balcony or external staircase that was later removed. It appears to have been built exactly as it exists today, a functional door leading to nothing but empty space. Interior doors present their own puzzles. Some doors are built at unusual heights, requiring visitors to step up or down significantly when passing from one room to another. Others are sized for people much smaller than average adults, with frames so low that anyone taller than 5 feet must duck to pass through. Still others are proportioned normally, but positioned in locations where they serve no apparent function, such as doors that open from one room directly into another room's closet. The windows of the Winchester Mystery House contribute to its reputation for architectural impossibility. The mansion contains 10,000 windows of various sizes, styles, and placements, but many violate basic principles of window design and placement. Numerous windows are installed in interior walls, looking from one room into another rather than providing views of the outside world or admitting natural light from outdoors. Some of these interior windows are placed at floor level, creating the unusual effect of being able to look through a wall near the baseboard into an adjacent room. Others are positioned near ceilings, offering glimpses into neighbouring spaces that serve no practical purpose for lighting or ventilation. The craftsmanship of these interior windows matches that of conventional exterior windows, with proper frames, sashes, and hardware, suggesting they were intentional design choices rather than construction errors. Exterior windows present their own peculiarities. Some are placed in locations where they cannot be opened due to structural elements blocking their operation. Others are positioned so close to walls or other buildings that they admit virtually no light. Several windows on upper floors look directly into the walls of adjacent sections of the house, creating the effect of windows that face other windows from just a few feet away. The room layouts throughout the Winchester house reflect the same disregard for conventional architectural logic found in its doors and windows. Rooms are nested within other rooms, creating spaces that can only be accessed by passing through multiple chambers. Some rooms have no apparent purpose, containing no fixtures, built-in furniture, or architectural features that would suggest their intended use. Others are so small that they can barely accommodate a single person, yet they include elaborate mouldings, detailed woodwork, and expensive finishes. One particularly puzzling feature is a room that measures only a few feet in each dimension, but includes a window, electric lighting, and carefully finished walls. The space is too small to serve as a closet and too elaborate to dismiss as a storage area. It appears to be a complete room in miniature, built with the same attention to detail as the mansion's grand parlours and bedrooms, but serving no identifiable function. Conversely, some rooms in the Winchester house are extraordinarily large, with ceilings that soar to unusual heights, and floor spaces that seem disproportionate to their furnishings or apparent purpose. These grand rooms often lack the architectural features that would typically define such spaces, such as formal fireplaces, elaborate chandeliers, or built-in bookcases. Instead, they stand as empty volumes, impressive in their scale but puzzling in their purpose. The hallways and corridors connecting the Winchester house's many rooms create a maze that has challenged visitors for more than a century. Some hallways extend for considerable distances without providing access to any rooms, ending at dead-end walls or turning back on themselves in loops that return visitors to their starting points. Others connect rooms in sequences that seem designed to confuse rather than facilitate navigation. Many corridors include sudden turns, unexpected steps, or changes in ceiling height that make navigation treacherous for those unfamiliar with the layout. Some hallways narrow dramatically, forcing visitors to walk single file through passages that began wide enough for multiple people. Others expand into alcoves or small chambers that serve no apparent purpose but break up the linear flow of the corridor. The Winchester house's cabinets and built-in storage areas contribute to its reputation for architectural peculiarity. Cabinets are installed at heights that make them impossible to reach without ladders. Kitchen cupboards are positioned near ceilings, far above the reach of anyone working at normal counter height. Bedroom closets are placed in locations that require climbing over furniture or crawling under low-hanging architectural features to access them. Some cabinets open to reveal depths of only a few inches, making them useless for storing anything larger than papers or small objects. Others are enormous, with interiors large enough to walk into, but they lack shelving, hanging rods, or other features that would make them functional for storage. The hardware on these cabinets matches the quality found throughout the house, suggesting they were built as permanent architectural features rather than temporary expedients. The number 13 appears throughout the Winchester house with a frequency that suggests either obsessive intentionality or remarkable coincidence. 13 bathrooms serve the mansion's 160 rooms. Many rooms contain exactly 13 windows. Staircases frequently include 13 steps, even when this number requires awkward proportions or unusual landing placements. Wallpaper patterns often repeat in groups of 13, and some rooms include 13 panels in their wainscoting, or 13 sections in their crown mouldings. The significance of this number in Sarah Winchester's design choices remains a matter of speculation. Some observers suggest that 13 held spiritual significance for her, possibly related to beliefs about supernatural protection or communication with spirits. Others propose that the repetition of 13 was coincidental, a result of proportional decisions that happened to produce this number repeatedly. Still, others argue that the 13 pattern has been exaggerated by tour guides and investigators seeking to add mystery to an already puzzling house. The Winchester House's fireplaces and chimneys present additional architectural curiosities. The mansion contains 47 fireplaces, but many are positioned in locations where they cannot function safely or effectively. Some fireplaces lack proper ventilation, with chimneys that terminate inside the house rather than extending through the roof. Others are built with flues that connect to chimneys serving other fireplaces, creating potential safety hazards. Several fireplaces are so small that they could never accommodate a fire large enough to heat their rooms, while others are disproportionately large for the spaces they occupy. Some include elaborate mantels and surrounds that suggest they were intended as focal points for important rooms, but they are positioned in corridors or utility areas where such prominence seems inappropriate. The heating and ventilation systems throughout the Winchester House reflect the same disregard for conventional design principles found in its other architectural features. Heating ducts run in circuitous routes that seem designed more to fill wall cavities than to deliver warm air efficiently. Ventilation openings are placed in locations where they provide little benefit for air circulation. Some rooms have multiple heating vents while others have none, creating uneven temperature distribution throughout the mansion. Electric lighting, which was installed throughout the house during the early 1900s, follows similarly puzzling patterns. Light switches are positioned in locations where they cannot easily be reached. Some rooms have numerous light fixtures, while others rely on single bulbs. Electrical conduits run in visible locations where they disrupt the visual continuity of walls and ceilings, suggesting that electrical installation was prioritized over aesthetic considerations. The Winchester House's architectural impossibilities extend to its relationship with the surrounding landscape. Windows that should provide views of gardens instead face walls or other sections of the building. External doors open onto areas where no walkways or stairs provide safe access to ground level. Balconies and porches are positioned where they receive no sunlight or offer no useful outdoor space. These architectural oddities, created through decades of continuous construction, transformed Sarah Winchester's home into something unprecedented in American domestic architecture. Whether the result of deliberate design choices, evolving construction priorities, or the influence of supernatural beliefs, these features created a house that challenges basic assumptions about how buildings should function. The Winchester Mystery House stands as a testament to the possibilities that emerge when unlimited financial resources meet unconventional architectural vision, creating a structure that continues to puzzle and fascinate visitors more than a century after its construction began. Chapter 6. Life Within the Labyrinth. Daily life at the Winchester Mystery House during its decades of construction presented challenges and routines unlike those found in any other American household. Sarah Winchester, her domestic staff, and the continuous parade of construction workers who laboured on the property developed systems for living and working within a structure that was simultaneously a home, a construction site, and an ever-evolving architectural experiment. The rhythms of ordinary domestic life had to adapt to the extraordinary circumstances of a house that never stopped growing and changing. Sarah Winchester's personal routine during the construction years was described by her household staff as both rigid and flexible, following patterns that accommodated her role as the director of an unprecedented building project. She rose each morning at dawn, regardless of the season, and began her day with a thorough inspection of the previous night's construction work. Armed with a notebook and measuring tape, she would walk through the newly completed areas, examining the quality of workmanship and making notes for modifications or corrections. These morning inspections could take several hours, as Sarah examined every detail of the construction with meticulous attention. She checked the alignment of door frames, the smoothness of plasterwork, the precision of window installations and the quality of finished carpentry. Workers reported that she had an exceptional eye for flaws or deviations from her specifications, often spotting problems that had escaped the notice of experienced craftsmen. After completing her inspection, Sarah would meet with her construction foreman to discuss the day's work schedule. These meetings typically took place in a room that she had designated as her office, though the location of this office changed periodically as new sections of the house were completed. During these sessions, she would provide detailed instructions for the day's construction activities, often sketching rough plans in her notebook to illustrate her requirements. The construction foreman during much of the building period was a man named John Hanson, who had taken over from Charles Davis in the early 1890s. Hanson later provided some of the most detailed accounts of what it was like to work for Sarah Winchester. According to Hanson, Mrs. Winchester possessed an unusual combination of precise technical knowledge and constantly evolving design ideas that made supervising her construction project both challenging and fascinating. Hanson reported that Sarah Winchester seemed to visualize the house as a living, growing entity rather than a static structure. She would frequently order modifications to recently completed rooms, not because the work was flawed, but because she had developed new ideas about how the spaces should function. Walls might be moved, doorways relocated, or ceiling heights altered based on her evolving vision of how the house should develop. The construction crew during peak building periods included between 15 and 25 skilled craftsmen working in rotating shifts to maintain 24-hour construction schedules. These workers were primarily local men, though Sarah Winchester also employed specialists brought in from San Francisco and other distant locations when particular skills were required. The continuous nature of the work provided steady employment for many families in the San Jose area, making the Winchester project an important part of the local economy. Working conditions at the Winchester house were generally considered excellent by the standards of the era. Sarah Winchester paid wages that were above average for construction work, provided meals for workers during their shifts, and maintained high safety standards for a time when industrial accidents were common. She also showed unusual consideration for her employees' comfort, providing heated break areas during winter months and cool, shaded spaces during the hot California summers. However, working on the Winchester project required adapting to unusual circumstances that distinguished it from conventional construction jobs. The continuous schedule meant that workers might be building additions to rooms while other craftsmen were still finishing interior work in adjacent areas. The lack of comprehensive building plans meant that workers often had to modify their techniques based on daily instructions rather than following established blueprints. The night shift workers, who maintained construction activities during evening and overnight hours, reported some of the most unusual experiences associated with working at the Winchester house. The combination of artificial lighting, complex room layouts, and the sounds of continuous construction created an atmosphere that many found unsettling. Workers described feeling disoriented in the maze-like passages, hearing unexplained sounds from other parts of the house, and occasionally encountering architectural features that seemed to appear overnight. Sarah Winchester's domestic staff during the construction years included a cook, several housekeepers, a personal secretary, gardeners, and various other household employees. These staff members lived in designated sections of the growing house, though their quarters were periodically relocated as new construction made their previous accommodations unavailable or unsuitable. The challenge of maintaining normal household routines within a structure undergoing constant renovation required considerable flexibility and patience. The cook, whose name is recorded in household records as Mrs. Mary Merriman, faced particular challenges in maintaining meal service while the kitchen areas were frequently modified or expanded. Sarah Winchester was reportedly a considerate employer who consulted with her cook about kitchen design and functionality, but the ongoing construction meant that cooking facilities were often disrupted by building activities. Mrs. Merriman adapted by developing portable cooking arrangements that could be moved as needed. Housekeeping in the Winchester Mystery House presented logistical challenges that increased dramatically as the building grew larger and more complex. The housekeeping staff, led by a woman identified in records as Mrs. Kate Marriott, developed systems for cleaning and maintaining rooms while construction continued around them. This required coordinating with construction schedules to avoid conflicts between cleaning activities and building work. As the house expanded to include dozens and eventually more than 100 rooms, the housekeeping staff had to develop methods for navigating the increasingly complex layout. New employees required extensive orientation to learn the room arrangements and passage connections. Even experienced staff members occasionally became lost in sections of the house that had been recently modified or expanded. Sarah Winchester's personal habits during the construction years reflected both her wealth and her increasing reclusiveness. She dressed simply but in high-quality clothing appropriate for walking through construction areas. She typically wore dark colours that would not show dust or debris from the building activities. Her only consistent ornament was a locket containing photographs of her deceased husband and daughter, which she wore daily throughout the construction period. Meals at the Winchester House were generally simple affairs, despite the elaborate kitchen facilities that were eventually installed. Sarah Winchester reportedly preferred plain cooking and modest portions, though she insisted on high-quality ingredients and careful preparation. She typically ate alone, taking her meals in a small dining room that was separate from the formal dining areas that were built for entertaining guests who rarely materialized. The Winchester House's growing reputation as an architectural curiosity began to attract visitors during the 1890s, though Sarah Winchester was generally reluctant to receive guests. When she did agree to meet with visitors, these encounters typically took place in one of the mansion's formal reception rooms, which were maintained in pristine condition, despite the ongoing construction elsewhere in the building. Visitors' accounts from this period provide some of the most vivid descriptions of what it was like to experience the Winchester House during its active construction phase. Most guests reported feeling immediately disoriented by the complex layout and unusual architectural features. The sound of hammering and sawing provided a constant background noise that reminded visitors that they were inside a building site as much as a residence. Dr. Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, visited the Winchester House in the early 1900s and later wrote about the experience. According to Doyle's account, Sarah Winchester was a gracious hostess who seemed genuinely interested in discussing the architectural features of her home. However, he noted that she deflected questions about her motivations for the continuous construction, describing the project simply as necessary work. The presidential visit that brought the most attention to the Winchester House occurred in 1903, when President Theodore Roosevelt toured the property during a visit to California. Roosevelt's visit was brief, lasting only about an hour, but it generated considerable newspaper coverage that helped establish the Winchester Mystery House as a nationally known curiosity. Roosevelt reportedly expressed amazement at the scale and complexity of the building project. Sarah Winchester's relationship with her construction workers was described by employees as professional but distant. She knew many of the long-term workers by name and showed concern for their welfare, but she maintained the formal boundaries appropriate to her social position. Workers reported that she was fair in her treatment of employees and generous in her compensation, but that she rarely engaged in casual conversation or personal discussions. The seasonal rhythms of construction at the Winchester House were influenced by both weather conditions and material availability. California's mild climate allowed for year-round building activities, but certain types of work were scheduled to take advantage of optimal conditions. Interior finishing work was often concentrated during winter months, when exterior construction might be hampered by rain, while major structural additions were typically undertaken during the dry summer and fall seasons. Supply logistics for the Winchester construction project required careful coordination to maintain the continuous building schedule. Lumber, hardware, and building materials were delivered on regular schedules with storage areas designed to accommodate the large quantities required for ongoing construction. Sarah Winchester maintained business relationships with suppliers throughout California and other western states, ensuring access to high-quality materials regardless of local availability. The Winchester House's growing size created practical challenges for daily operations that extended beyond construction management. Heating the enormous structure during winter months required an extensive system of furnaces and ducts. Lighting the maze of rooms and corridors required careful planning and substantial electrical infrastructure. Water and sewage systems had to be continuously expanded to serve new areas of the house. Communication within the Winchester House became increasingly difficult as the structure grew larger and more complex. Sarah Winchester installed a system of electric bells and speaking tubes that allowed her to communicate with different areas of the house from her office or private quarters. However, the effectiveness of this system was limited by the irregular layout of rooms and the ongoing construction activities that frequently disrupted utility installations. The psychological effects of living and working within the Winchester Mystery House were noted by many of those who spent extended time on the property. The combination of continuous construction noise, complex navigation requirements, and unusual architectural features created an environment that many found emotionally challenging. Some staff members adapted well to these conditions, while others found employment elsewhere after brief tenures. Sarah Winchester herself seemed to thrive within the unique environment she'd created. Staff members reported that she appeared most energetic and engaged when discussing construction plans or examining newly completed work. The building project provided her with daily structure and purpose that filled the void left by her personal losses and social isolation. For Sarah Winchester, the Winchester Mystery House was not just a residence but a life's work that gave meaning to her existence during nearly 4 decades of continuous construction. Chapter 7: Spirits and Séances. The late 19th century was an era of unprecedented fascination with communication between the living and the dead, and California was at the epicenter of America's spiritualist movement. In this atmosphere of supernatural exploration and mediumistic claims, the legend of Sarah Winchester's spiritual motivations for her continuous construction project took root and flourished. Whether these stories reflect genuine beliefs that guided her architectural decisions or represent later embellishments to an already mysterious tale, remains one of the most debated aspects of the Winchester Mystery House story. Spiritualism as an organized movement had emerged in America during the 1840s, sparked by the alleged communication with spirits achieved by the Fox sisters in upstate New York. By the time Sarah Winchester arrived in California in 1884, séances and mediumistic consultations had become fashionable entertainment among wealthy Americans, particularly those who had suffered personal losses and sought comfort in the possibility of continued communication with deceased loved ones. California's spiritualist community was particularly active and influential during the 1880s and 90s. San Francisco housed numerous mediums, psychics, and spiritual advisors who catered to the wealthy residents of the Bay Area. San Jose itself had a smaller but dedicated spiritualist community that included several individuals who claimed particular expertise in communicating with spirits associated with violent deaths or traumatic circumstances. According to the most persistent legends surrounding the Winchester Mystery House, Sarah Winchester's involvement with spiritualism began during her period of grief, following the deaths of her husband and daughter. The story, which cannot be verified through contemporary documentation, claims that Sarah consulted a medium in either Connecticut or California, who told her that she was cursed by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles. The medium, according to this legend, informed Sarah that the deaths of her husband and infant daughter were supernatural retribution for the thousands of lives taken by Winchester firearms. The only way to appease these vengeful spirits and protect herself from further supernatural punishment was to move west and build a house that would provide dwelling places for the restless dead. Most importantly, the construction must never cease, because the spirits would remain peaceful only as long as building continued. Variations of this legend suggest that the medium provided specific instructions for the construction project. The house must be built in a confusing manner that would trap evil spirits while providing comfortable accommodations for benevolent ones. Staircases that led nowhere would confuse malevolent entities, while the numerous rooms would offer peaceful resting places for spirits seeking redemption or comfort. These spiritualist explanations for the Winchester House's architectural oddities gained credibility among believers because they provided rational explanations for otherwise inexplicable design choices. Why build doors that opened onto empty air? To confuse spirits who might attempt to harm Sarah Winchester? Why construct staircases that led to solid ceilings? To trap malevolent entities in architectural dead ends where they could cause no harm? What is documented is that Sarah Winchester did develop relationships with several individuals in the California spiritualist community during her years in San Jose. Local newspaper records and society reports from the 1890s mention her attendance at spiritualist meetings and her consultations with mediums who claimed to facilitate communication with deceased spirits. One of the most frequently mentioned figures in accounts of Sarah Winchester's spiritual activities was a medium known as Adam Coons, who operated in San Jose during the 1890s. Contemporary newspaper advertisements indicate that Coons offered séances and spiritual consultations from his residence near downtown San Jose. Several local residents later claimed that Sarah Winchester was among his regular clients, though Coons himself left no detailed records of his consultations. According to unverified reports from Winchester House staff members, Sarah Winchester conducted regular séances within the mansion itself, using a room that was specifically designed for spiritual communication. This room, which tour guides today identify as the Blue Room or Séance Room, allegedly contained features intended to facilitate contact with spirits, including special acoustic properties and symbolic decorations. The Blue Room, located in the central section of the Winchester House, does contain unusual architectural features that distinguish it from other rooms in the mansion. The room has only one entrance, accessible through a complex series of passages that would make it difficult for casual visitors to locate. The walls are painted in deep blue, a colour that spiritualists of the era associated with psychic protection and enhanced spiritual communication. The room's windows are positioned to provide very limited natural light, creating an atmosphere of perpetual twilight that spiritualists believed was conducive to supernatural contact. The floor is laid with intricate parquet patterns that include symbols that some observers have interpreted as having spiritual significance, though their meaning, if any, remains unclear. Staff members who worked at the Winchester House during the construction period provided conflicting accounts of Sarah Winchester's spiritual activities. Some employees reported witnessing séances or spiritual consultations taking place in the Blue Room, often involving visitors who arrived at the house during evening hours and departed before dawn. These sessions allegedly included typical spiritualist practices such as table tipping, automatic writing, and attempted communication with deceased spirits. Other staff members, however, denied witnessing any supernatural activities and suggested that stories of séances were exaggerated or fabricated by people seeking to add mystery to an already unusual household. These skeptical accounts portrayed Sarah Winchester as a practical, if eccentric, woman who was more interested in construction details than spiritual communication. The conflict between these different staff accounts reflects the broader uncertainty surrounding Sarah Winchester's actual beliefs and practices. As a private person who rarely discussed her personal motivations with employees or visitors, Sarah left little direct evidence of her spiritual interests or lack thereof. The stories of supernatural influence on her construction project may represent genuine beliefs that guided her decisions, or they may be later embellishments created to explain behaviour that had more mundane motivations. What is documented is that Sarah Winchester maintained correspondence with several individuals associated with the spiritualist movement during her California years. Letters preserved in the Winchester Company archives include communications with mediums, spiritualist publications, and organisations dedicated to psychical research. However, these letters deal primarily with practical matters such as appointment scheduling and payment arrangements, rather than detailed discussions of spiritual beliefs or supernatural experiences. The Winchester House's alleged supernatural influence extended beyond Sarah Winchester's personal spiritual practices to include claims that the building itself was designed according to spiritualist principles. Some observers suggested that the house's complex layout was intended to create a spiritual maze that would channel supernatural energies in beneficial directions while protecting the living inhabitants from harmful spiritual influences. According to these theories, the number 13 that appears repeatedly throughout the Winchester house held special significance in spiritualist practice. 13 was allegedly considered a powerful number for spiritual protection and communication, explaining why Sarah Winchester incorporated it into so many architectural features. Windows, steps, panels, and other elements were arranged in groups of 13 to enhance the house's effectiveness as a spiritual sanctuary. The Winchester House's numerous mirrors were also interpreted as having spiritual significance by those who believed in supernatural influences on its construction. Spiritualists of the era often used mirrors in séances and spiritual practices, believing that reflective surfaces could facilitate communication between the physical and spiritual worlds. The Winchester House contains mirrors in unusual locations and arrangements that some observers have suggested were intended for supernatural rather than decorative purposes. Similarly, the house's many bells and chimes were interpreted by believers as tools for spiritual communication rather than conventional household conveniences. Sarah Winchester installed bells throughout the mansion, including elaborate chiming systems that could be activated from various locations. Spiritualists suggested that these bells were used to signal the presence of spirits or to call supernatural entities for communication sessions. The Winchester House's gardens and grounds were also said to reflect spiritual influences on their design and maintenance. Sarah Winchester maintained extensive flower gardens, herb gardens, and ornamental plantings that some observers claimed included species chosen for their alleged supernatural properties. Certain plants were traditionally associated with spiritual protection or enhanced psychic sensitivity in 19th century folk beliefs. However, skeptical observers noted that many of the Winchester House's allegedly supernatural features could be explained by more conventional motivations. The house's complex layout might have resulted from continuous construction, without comprehensive planning rather than deliberate spiritual design. The recurring number 13 could have been coincidental, or the result of proportional decisions that had nothing to do with supernatural beliefs. The question of Sarah Winchester's actual spiritual beliefs and their influence on her construction project remains unresolved because she rarely discussed these matters with contemporary observers. Letters and documents from her lifetime contain few references to supernatural beliefs or spiritualist practices. Her public statements about the Winchester House construction focused on practical matters such as providing employment for local workers and creating a comfortable residence. Modern historians who have studied the Winchester Mystery House have generally concluded that, while Sarah Winchester may have had some involvement with spiritualist practices common to her era and social class, the elaborate supernatural explanations for her construction project probably developed after her death. These stories provided dramatic explanations for architectural choices that might have had more mundane origins in grief, eccentricity, or simple personal preference. Nevertheless, the spiritualist interpretation of the Winchester Mystery House became an integral part of its legend and continues to influence how visitors understand and experience the building. Whether Sarah Winchester actually believed that she was building a sanctuary for supernatural spirits, or was simply an eccentric widow with unlimited resources and unusual architectural interests, the spiritual legends surrounding her house have become as much a part of its identity as its physical features. The Winchester House's reputation as a spiritually significant location has attracted paranormal investigators, psychics, and ghost hunters throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Many of these visitors have reported supernatural experiences within the mansion, ranging from unexplained sounds and temperature changes to alleged sightings of ghostly figures. These modern supernatural accounts build upon the historical legends of spiritual influence, while adding contemporary elements to the Winchester Mystery House's ongoing reputation as one of America's most haunted locations. Whether the Winchester Mystery House was actually built according to spiritual guidance, or simply acquired its supernatural reputation through decades of legend and speculation, the question of its spiritual significance remains central to its enduring fascination. The house stands as a monument to the complex relationship between grief, belief, and human behaviour, embodying the ways that personal loss and unlimited resources can combine to create something that transcends conventional understanding of architecture, spirituality, and the boundaries between rational and supernatural explanations for human actions. Chapter 8. Documented Tragedies and Historical Events. While legends of supernatural influence surround the Winchester Mystery House, the documented history of the property includes several tragic events and significant occurrences that can be verified through contemporary records. These factual incidents, ranging from construction accidents to natural disasters, provide a sobering counterpoint to the mythical narratives that have grown around Sarah Winchester's architectural project. The real tragedies that occurred at the Winchester House were products of human mortality and natural forces rather than supernatural vengeance. The most thoroughly documented tragedy in the Winchester House's history occurred during the Great San Francisco earthquake of April 18, 1906. This devastating seismic event, which measured approximately 7.9 on the Richter scale, caused extensive damage throughout the San Francisco Bay Area and fundamentally altered the Winchester Mansion structure and Sarah Winchester's approach to her ongoing construction project. The earthquake struck at 5:12 in the morning, catching most residents of the region asleep in their beds. Sarah Winchester, then 66 years old, was in her bedroom in the mansion's upper floors when the violent shaking began. Contemporary accounts describe the tremor as lasting between 45 seconds and 1 minute, an eternity for anyone experiencing the terror of a major earthquake. The Winchester House, despite its unusual architecture, had been built with solid construction techniques and high-quality materials that helped it withstand the initial shock better than many conventional buildings in the area. However, the mansion's complex multi-story structure and irregular weight distribution made it vulnerable to the type of lateral forces generated by seismic activity. During the earthquake, several sections of the Winchester House suffered severe damage. The 7-story tower that had been one of the mansion's most distinctive features partially collapsed, with its upper floors pancaking down onto the lower levels. The collapse trapped Sarah Winchester in her bedroom, which was located in a section of the house adjacent to the damaged tower. Sarah Winchester remained trapped in her bedroom for several hours after the earthquake ended. The doorway to her room had been blocked by fallen debris from the tower collapse, and the structural damage made it dangerous for rescue workers to immediately attempt to reach her. Construction workers who lived on the property worked carefully to clear a path to Sarah's location, concerned that further structural collapse might occur if they moved debris carelessly. When Sarah Winchester was finally freed from her bedroom, she had suffered no serious physical injuries, though she was understandably shaken by the experience. However, the earthquake had a profound psychological impact on her approach to the house and its ongoing construction. Rather than interpreting the disaster as a reason to stop building or to reconstruct damaged areas, Sarah made decisions that added to the mystery surrounding her motivations. Sarah Winchester ordered that the earthquake-damaged sections of the house be sealed off rather than repaired or demolished. The collapsed 7-story tower, the damaged rooms, and the debris-filled passages were closed with new walls and doors, effectively creating a time capsule of the earthquake's destruction within the mansion. These sealed sections remain untouched today, preserving the damage exactly as it appeared in the aftermath of the 1906 earthquake. The decision to seal rather than repair earthquake damage has been interpreted in various ways by those seeking to understand Sarah Winchester's motivations. Some observers suggested that she viewed the earthquake as a supernatural sign, perhaps indicating that certain sections of the house had served their spiritual purpose and should be preserved as monuments. Others proposed more practical explanations, such as the high cost of clearing debris from structurally compromised areas. Construction at the Winchester House resumed within days of the earthquake, but in areas that had not been damaged by the seismic event. Sarah Winchester redirected her building efforts toward expanding other sections of the mansion, maintaining her pattern of continuous construction while avoiding the earthquake-damaged zones. This decision resulted in the current Winchester Mystery House having sealed, inaccessible areas that contain earthquake damage from more than a century ago. Beyond the major earthquake damage, the Winchester House experienced several documented construction accidents during its decades of continuous building. The most serious of these incidents occurred in 1897, when a carpenter named James Graham fell from scaffolding while working on the mansion's exterior. Graham suffered serious injuries that required several months of recovery, though he ultimately returned to work on the Winchester project. The accident involving James Graham highlighted the safety challenges inherent in the Winchester House construction project. The mansion's irregular architecture, with its varying floor heights and unusual structural configurations, created working conditions that were more hazardous than those found on conventional building sites. Workers had to adapt constantly to changing elevations, unexpected obstacles, and architectural features that departed from standard construction practices. Sarah Winchester's response to construction accidents was generally considerate and generous by the standards of her era. She provided medical care for injured workers, continued to pay wages during recovery periods, and implemented safety measures intended to prevent similar incidents. However, the nature of the construction project, with its emphasis on continuous building and architectural experimentation, meant that some level of risk was inherent in the work. Another documented tragedy associated with the Winchester property was the death of a household staff member named Emma O'Leary in 1901. O'Leary, who worked as a housekeeper at the mansion, died from pneumonia after a brief illness. While her death was not directly related to the house's unusual features or construction activities, it occurred during a period when several staff members had left their positions, leading to speculation about the psychological effects of working in such an unusual environment. The Winchester House's location in agricultural Santa Clara Valley exposed it to several natural disasters beyond earthquakes during Sarah Winchester's residence. Severe winter floods in 1890 and 1898 caused damage to the mansion's lower levels and required extensive cleanup and repair efforts. These floods were regional events that affected much of the San Jose area. But the Winchester House's complex drainage systems and multiple levels created particular challenges for flood recovery. During the 1890 flood, water entered several ground floor rooms of the Winchester House and remained trapped in low-lying areas due to the building's irregular floor elevations. The cleanup effort required draining water from rooms that had no direct access to the exterior, a task complicated by the mansion's maze-like layout and unusual architectural features. Some rooms had to be accessed through circuitous routes that made it difficult to remove water and damaged furnishings. Fire presented another documented threat to the Winchester House during the construction period. In 1896, a small fire started in one of the mansion's workshops when oil-soaked rags ignited spontaneously. The fire was quickly extinguished by workers who happened to be nearby, but the incident demonstrated the vulnerability of a wooden structure filled with construction materials and workshop equipment. The fire incident led Sarah Winchester to install more extensive fire prevention measures throughout the house, including additional water storage tanks and improved access routes for emergency situations. However, the mansion's complex layout continued to present challenges for fire safety, as many areas could only be reached through narrow passages or circuitous routes that would impede emergency evacuation. Local records document several incidents of visitors becoming lost in the Winchester House during the construction period. While these incidents did not result in serious injuries, they highlighted the genuine disorientation that the mansion's layout could cause for unfamiliar visitors. In 1899, a delivery driver became lost in the house's service areas and spent more than 2 hours trying to find his way back to an exit. The incident with the lost delivery driver prompted Sarah Winchester to implement a system of guides for visitors and service personnel who needed to navigate the house's interior. Staff members were assigned to escort visitors through the mansion, ensuring that no one would become lost in the increasingly complex network of rooms and passages. This system remained in place throughout the remainder of the construction period. The Winchester House's reputation for unusual incidents extended to problems with its mechanical systems during the construction years. The mansion's heating system, which included multiple furnaces and an extensive network of ducts, experienced several failures that left portions of the house without heat during winter months. These mechanical problems were often difficult to diagnose and repair due to the building's irregular layout and the continuous modifications being made to its structure. Electrical problems also plagued the Winchester House after electric lighting was installed in the early 1900s. The mansion's electrical system had to be continuously modified to accommodate new construction, and the irregular room layouts made it difficult to install wiring according to standard practices. Several minor electrical fires occurred during the construction period, though none caused significant damage to the structure. The Winchester House experienced theft incidents during the construction years, as the valuable materials and tools required for the building project attracted criminal attention. In 1904, thieves broke into the mansion's storage areas and stole copper plumbing fixtures and electrical components. The theft was discovered by night shift construction workers, but the perpetrators were never caught. Security concerns led Sarah Winchester to implement measures intended to protect the property from criminal activity. These measures included hiring night watchmen, installing improved locks on storage areas, and restricting access to certain sections of the house. However, the mansion's size and complexity made it difficult to monitor all areas effectively, and minor theft incidents continued to occur periodically. Weather-related incidents affected the Winchester House throughout the construction period, as California's occasional severe storms created challenges for ongoing building activities. High winds in 1903 damaged scaffolding and temporary construction equipment, requiring expensive replacement and causing delays in construction schedules. Heavy rains periodically flooded work areas and damaged materials that had been stored outdoors. The Winchester House's documented history also includes several incidents involving wildlife that found its way into the mansion's complex interior spaces. Bats, birds, and small mammals occasionally became trapped in the building's upper levels or unusual architectural features, requiring staff efforts to capture and remove them. While these incidents were minor, they illustrated the ways that the house's unconventional design created unexpected problems for its inhabitants. Labour disputes affected the Winchester construction project on several occasions during the 1890s, as workers sought better wages and working conditions. While Sarah Winchester was generally considered a fair employer, the demanding nature of continuous construction and the unusual working conditions led to periodic conflicts with construction crews. These disputes were typically resolved through negotiations, but they sometimes caused temporary delays in building activities. The documented tragedies and incidents at the Winchester Mystery House provide a factual foundation beneath the layers of legend and supernatural speculation that have accumulated around the property. These real events, recorded in contemporary documents and newspaper accounts, demonstrate that the Winchester House was subject to the same natural forces and human challenges that affected any large construction project of its era. While the mansion's unusual features may have created unique circumstances for some of these incidents, the fundamental causes were rooted in the practical realities of building and maintaining an enormous, complex structure rather than supernatural influences. Chapter 9. Echoes of the Unseen. The Winchester Mystery House's reputation as one of America's most haunted locations has been built upon more than a century of reported supernatural encounters, ranging from the whispered accounts of 19th century staff members to the detailed investigations of modern paranormal researchers. These reports, while impossible to verify scientifically, form a consistent pattern of unusual experiences that have shaped the mansion's identity and continue to intrigue visitors seeking contact with forces beyond conventional understanding. The earliest reported supernatural experiences at the Winchester House date to the construction period itself, when workers and staff members began sharing stories of unexplained phenomena occurring within the growing mansion. According to accounts preserved in local newspaper interviews and personal letters, these initial reports focused primarily on auditory experiences, footsteps in empty hallways, whispered voices in unoccupied rooms, and the sound of construction work continuing in areas where no workers were present. James Murphy, a carpenter who worked on the Winchester project from 1887 to 1894, provided one of the most detailed early accounts of supernatural experiences at the mansion. In an interview with the San Jose Mercury News published in 1908, Murphy described hearing footsteps following him through the house's corridors during night shifts, even when he knew he was the only person working in that section of the building. According to Murphy's account, these phantom footsteps would begin shortly after he started his work and would continue throughout his shift, always seeming to stay just out of sight behind him or around the next corner. When he would stop to listen, the footsteps would cease, but they would resume as soon as he returned to his work. Murphy reported that other night shift workers had similar experiences, and that the phenomenon became so common that workers began referring to their invisible companion as the supervisor. Household staff members during Sarah Winchester's lifetime also reported unusual experiences, though their accounts were typically more circumspect due to concerns about employment security. Mary Hopkins, who worked as a housekeeper at the Winchester House from 1896 to 1903, later told her family about encounters with what she described as cold spots in certain rooms that could not be explained by drafts or heating system irregularities. Hopkins reported that these cold areas would appear suddenly in rooms that had been comfortably warm just moments before, and that the temperature change was localized to specific spots rather than affecting entire rooms. She noted that these cold zones often coincided with reports of other unusual phenomena, such as doors that would open or close without apparent cause, and windows that would rattle despite the absence of wind. The Winchester House's complex architectural layout contributed to reports of supernatural activity by creating acoustic conditions that could generate unexplained sounds. The mansion's numerous empty rooms, long corridors, and unusual ceiling heights created echo chambers and sound channels that could carry voices, footsteps, and other noises from distant parts of the building in distorted and disembodied forms. However, staff members and workers reported that they learned to distinguish between sounds that could be explained by the building's acoustic properties and experiences that seemed to have no conventional source. Thomas Chen, a Chinese-American craftsman who worked on decorative woodwork throughout the house during the 1890s, described hearing piano music coming from rooms that contained no musical instruments and seeing lights in windows of rooms that had no electrical connections. Sarah Winchester herself rarely discussed supernatural experiences, maintaining her characteristic privacy about personal matters throughout her lifetime. However, according to accounts from staff members who worked closely with her, she did occasionally acknowledge unusual phenomena in the house. Margaret Fillmore, who served as Sarah's personal secretary from 1901 to 1907, later told family members that Mrs. Winchester would sometimes pause during their work sessions and listen intently to sounds that Fillmore could not hear. According to Fillmore's account, Sarah Winchester would occasionally cancel construction plans for certain rooms or areas of the house, without providing explanations for her decisions. Fillmore suspected that these changes were related to supernatural experiences, though Sarah never explicitly discussed such matters. The pattern of unexplained construction modifications added another layer to the growing belief that supernatural forces influenced the mansion's ongoing development. The period immediately following Sarah Winchester's death in 1922 marked a significant increase in reported supernatural activity at the mansion. With construction finally ended, and the house standing empty except for caretakers, visitors and staff began reporting more frequent and more dramatic encounters with unexplained phenomena. John Hanson, the construction foreman who had overseen much of the building project during its final years, remained at the property as a caretaker after Sarah's death. Hanson reported that the absence of continuous construction seemed to alter the atmosphere of the house dramatically. According to his accounts, the mansion felt restless, without the constant activity that had characterized it for nearly 4 decades. Hanson described hearing sounds that seemed to be construction work continuing in various parts of the house, particularly during the early morning hours when the actual building activity had traditionally begun each day. He reported hearing hammering, sawing, and the movement of materials, but when he investigated these sounds, he would find empty rooms with no evidence of any activity. The Winchester House opened to public tours in 1923, and visitor accounts immediately began adding to the growing collection of supernatural reports. Early tour guides noted that visitors frequently reported feeling observed or followed while walking through the mansion's corridors, and that some guests would become visibly uncomfortable in certain rooms for no apparent reason. One of the most frequently reported supernatural experiences among early visitors was the sensation of being touched or gently pushed by invisible hands, particularly on the mansion's numerous staircases. These reports were so common that tour guides began warning visitors about the phenomenon and advising them to hold handrails securely while navigating the house's stairs. Photographic evidence of alleged supernatural activity at the Winchester House began accumulating during the 1930s and 1940s as camera technology became more accessible to amateur investigators. Visitors and tour guides reported capturing images that appeared to show human figures in areas where no living people were present, though the quality and circumstances of these early photographs made definitive interpretation difficult. The most famous early photographic evidence was an image taken in 1938 by a tourist named Robert Johnson, which appeared to show a woman in Victorian-era dress standing in one of the mansion's upper-floor windows. The photograph was examined by several photography experts who concluded that it had not been deliberately manipulated, though they could not confirm whether the figure represented a supernatural apparition or some form of optical illusion. During the 1950s and 60s, the Winchester Mystery House attracted attention from early paranormal researchers who attempted to apply scientific methods to investigating supernatural claims. These investigators used recording equipment, temperature measurement devices, and electromagnetic field detectors to document unusual phenomena within the mansion. Dr. William Barrett, a professor of physics at Stanford University, conducted one of the first scientific investigations of the Winchester House in 1957. Barrett's team spent 3 nights in the mansion, monitoring various rooms with electronic equipment while documenting any unusual occurrences. Their report, published in the Journal of Parapsychological Research, described several incidents of unexplained electromagnetic fluctuations and recorded sounds that appeared to have no identifiable source. Barrett's investigation noted particular activity in the room that had served as Sarah Winchester's bedroom and in the Blue Room where séances had allegedly been conducted. The team recorded temperature variations of up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, occurring within minutes in these areas, along with electromagnetic readings that suggested the presence of energy sources that could not be located or explained. The emergence of television and documentary filmmaking during the 1970s brought increased attention to the Winchester Mystery House's supernatural reputation. Television crews filming within the mansion reported equipment malfunctions, unexplained shadows appearing in footage, and audio recordings that captured voices and sounds with no identifiable origin. One of the most widely reported incidents occurred during the filming of a documentary in 1976, when a television crew's cameras repeatedly malfunctioned while attempting to film in the séance room. The equipment functioned normally in other areas of the house, but 3 different cameras failed when moved into the Blue Room, displaying identical electrical problems that technicians could not diagnose or repair. Modern paranormal investigation techniques have been applied to the Winchester Mystery House extensively since the 1980s, with teams using advanced electronic equipment to detect and record alleged supernatural activity. These investigations have produced numerous audio recordings of unexplained voices, known as electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, as well as photographic and video evidence that investigators claim supports the existence of supernatural presences in the mansion. The Winchester Mystery House has been featured on numerous television programs dedicated to paranormal investigation, including Ghost Hunters, Most Haunted, and Ghost Adventures. These programs have documented a wide range of alleged supernatural phenomena, from moving objects and unexplained sounds to full-body apparitions and communication attempts with deceased spirits. Investigators report that certain areas of the Winchester house consistently produce more supernatural activity than others. The staircase that leads to nowhere, Sarah Winchester's bedroom, the Blue Room, and the sealed earthquake-damaged sections are frequently cited as locations where paranormal experiences are most likely to occur. Tour guides and staff members note that these areas often produce unusual electromagnetic readings and temperature fluctuations that cannot be explained by building systems or environmental conditions. Contemporary visitor accounts continue to add to the Winchester Mystery House's supernatural reputation. Guests regularly report feeling watched, experiencing sudden temperature changes, hearing unexplained sounds, and sensing invisible presences throughout the mansion. Some visitors report more dramatic experiences, including apparitions of human figures, objects moving without cause, and direct communication attempts from unseen entities. The consistency of supernatural reports over more than a century has impressed even skeptical observers, who note that similar experiences are reported by visitors with no prior knowledge of the mansion's haunted reputation. Children, who are often considered more sensitive to supernatural phenomena, frequently report seeing people in the house who are invisible to adults, and animals brought into the mansion often display behavior suggesting they sense presences that humans cannot detect. Staff members who work at the Winchester Mystery House as tour guides and maintenance personnel report that supernatural experiences are a regular part of their employment. Many long-term employees develop personal relationships with what they believe are the mansion's resident spirits, reporting consistent encounters with specific entities that seem to have distinct personalities and preferences. According to staff accounts, the most frequently encountered spirit is believed to be Sarah Winchester herself, who is reportedly seen or sensed in various parts of the house, particularly areas where she spent the most time during her lifetime. Witnesses describe a small woman in Victorian dress who appears briefly before vanishing, often in locations associated with construction oversight or architectural planning. Other frequently reported spirits include construction workers who allegedly continue their building activities in death, household staff members who maintain their domestic duties, and unidentified figures who may represent the Winchester rifle victims that legend claims inhabit the mansion. These spirits are generally described as benevolent or neutral, showing curiosity about living visitors rather than hostility or malevolent intent. The Winchester Mystery House's supernatural reputation has been enhanced by its use as a location for paranormal research and investigation training. The mansion hosts regular flashlight tours and overnight investigation events that allow visitors to explore the building during nighttime hours when supernatural activity is believed to be most intense. Whether the Winchester Mystery House is actually haunted by supernatural spirits, or whether its reputation results from suggestion, environmental factors, and the power of legend remains a matter of personal belief and interpretation. What cannot be disputed is that the mansion continues to generate reports of unusual experiences from visitors and staff members who approach it with varying degrees of skepticism and belief. The house stands as a monument to the enduring human fascination with the possibility that consciousness might survive physical death, and that certain locations might serve as bridges between the world of the living and whatever lies beyond. Chapter 10. The House in the Modern World. The transformation of the Winchester Mystery House from a private residence into a cultural phenomenon began in earnest during the mid-20th century, as advances in mass media and America's growing fascination with the paranormal brought Sarah Winchester's architectural marvel to national and international attention. What had once been a local curiosity in San Jose became a symbol of American Gothic mystery, inspiring countless books, films, television programs, and investigations that cemented its place in popular culture as one of the nation's most recognizable haunted houses. The Winchester Mystery House's journey into popular culture accelerated during the 1950s and 60s, when magazines and newspapers began featuring detailed articles about the mansion's unusual history and alleged supernatural activity. Publications ranging from Life magazine to local California newspapers ran feature stories that introduced the Winchester House to readers across the United States, establishing the basic narrative elements that would define its public image for decades to come. These early media accounts established several key themes that would become central to the Winchester Mystery House's popular culture identity: the tragic story of Sarah Winchester's personal losses, the mysterious motivations for her continuous construction project, the house's bewildering architectural features, and its reputation as a haunted location. Writers often emphasized the most dramatic aspects of these stories, sometimes embellishing details to enhance their narrative impact. The rise of television during the 1960s provided new opportunities for the Winchester Mystery House to reach mass audiences. Early television documentaries about American mysteries and unexplained phenomena frequently featured segments on the mansion, using its visual complexity and supernatural reputation to create compelling programming for viewers fascinated by the unknown. One of the most influential early television appearances was a segment on the popular program One Step Beyond, which aired in 1961. This episode, titled The House That Fear Built, dramatized Sarah Winchester's story and included extensive footage of the mansion's interior, introducing millions of viewers to the staircase that leads nowhere and the doors that open onto empty air. The program's dramatic presentation established many of the visual and narrative conventions that would be repeated in subsequent media coverage. The Winchester Mystery House's management recognized the value of media attention and began actively courting filmmakers, journalists, and television producers during the 1970s. This period marked the beginning of the mansion's transformation from a tourist attraction focused primarily on architectural curiosity to a destination marketed specifically for its supernatural reputation and paranormal appeal. The emergence of paranormal investigation as popular entertainment during the 1980s brought a new type of media attention to the Winchester Mystery House. Television programs dedicated to ghost hunting and supernatural investigation began using the mansion as a featured location, conducting overnight investigations that were filmed and broadcast to audiences eager for evidence of life after death. The Winchester Mystery House, an investigation, aired on the Discovery Channel in 1987 and became one of the most watched paranormal documentaries of its era. The program featured a team of investigators using electronic equipment to detect supernatural activity throughout the mansion, capturing several incidents of unexplained phenomena that were presented as evidence of genuine haunting activity. The success of this documentary established a template for Winchester Mystery House media coverage that emphasized scientific investigation of supernatural claims. Subsequent programs would feature increasingly sophisticated equipment and investigation techniques, but the basic format of experts exploring the mansion in search of paranormal evidence remained consistent. The Winchester Mystery House became a frequent subject for paranormal investigation television programs during the 1990s and 2000s. Shows such as Ghost Hunters, Most Haunted, Paranormal State, and Ghost Adventures all featured episodes filmed at the mansion, each contributing to its growing reputation as one of America's most actively haunted locations. Ghost Adventures, which filmed at the Winchester Mystery House in 2009, produced one of the most dramatic and widely viewed paranormal investigation episodes in the mansion's media history. The program's investigators reported experiencing physical attacks by unseen entities, captured numerous electronic voice phenomena recordings, and documented several incidents of unexplained electromagnetic activity throughout their overnight investigation. The episode generated significant controversy when investigators claimed to have made contact with the spirit of Sarah Winchester herself, presenting audio recordings that they interpreted as direct communication from the mansion's famous former resident. While skeptics questioned the authenticity of these recordings, the episode significantly boosted public interest in the Winchester Mystery House and established it as a premier destination for paranormal tourism. The Winchester Mystery House's appearances in fictional media have been equally influential in shaping its popular culture identity. The mansion has served as inspiration for countless horror novels, films and television programs that use its architectural impossibilities and supernatural reputation as elements in fictional narratives about haunted houses and ghostly encounters. Stephen King referenced the Winchester Mystery House in several of his novels, most notably in Rose Red, where he created a fictional mansion clearly inspired by Sarah Winchester's architectural achievement. King's portrayal emphasized the psychological horror of a house that grows beyond human comprehension, driven by supernatural forces that use continuous construction to maintain their presence in the physical world. The 2018 film Winchester, starring Helen Mirren as Sarah Winchester, brought the mansion's story to mainstream cinema audiences worldwide. While the film took considerable creative liberties with historical facts, it introduced the Winchester Mystery House to millions of viewers who had never heard of the real-life architectural marvel, generating renewed interest in visiting the actual mansion. The film's production involved extensive consultation with Winchester Mystery House staff and historians, and many scenes were filmed at the actual mansion. However, the movie's focus on supernatural horror rather than historical accuracy led to some criticism from preservationists and historians who felt that dramatic embellishments overshadowed the genuine historical significance of Sarah Winchester's architectural achievement. Modern paranormal investigation at the Winchester Mystery House has been revolutionized by advances in the electronic equipment and recording technology. Contemporary investigators use digital audio recorders, electromagnetic field detectors, thermal imaging cameras, and motion sensors to document alleged supernatural activity with unprecedented precision and detail. The mansion's management has adapted to accommodate this technological evolution by providing investigators with electrical access, climate-controlled storage for sensitive equipment, and flexible scheduling that allows for extended overnight investigations. These accommodations have made the Winchester Mystery House a preferred location for serious paranormal researchers who require controlled conditions for their work. The Winchester Mystery House's social media presence has become an important element of its modern marketing strategy. The mansion maintains active accounts on platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where staff members share historical photographs, behind-the-scenes content, and updates about paranormal investigation results, with thousands of followers worldwide. These social media channels allow the Winchester Mystery House to engage directly with paranormal enthusiasts, history buffs, and curious visitors, building communities of interest that extend far beyond the San Jose area. The mansion regularly shares visitor-submitted photographs and videos that appear to show supernatural phenomena, encouraging public participation in documenting alleged paranormal activity. The Winchester Mystery House has embraced its role as a cultural icon by developing educational programs that explore both its historical significance and its paranormal reputation. School groups, history societies, and paranormal investigation clubs regularly visit the mansion for specialized tours that emphasize different aspects of its complex identity. These educational programs attempt to balance respect for Sarah Winchester's historical legacy with acknowledgement of the supernatural beliefs that have become inseparable from the mansion's public identity. Guides present historical facts about the construction project, while also discussing the paranormal claims that have made the house famous, allowing visitors to draw their own conclusions about the relationship between history and legend. The Winchester Mystery House's influence on paranormal tourism has been profound, establishing a model for how allegedly haunted locations can be marketed as entertainment destinations while maintaining historical integrity. The mansion's success has inspired similar marketing approaches at other supposedly supernatural locations throughout the United States and internationally. Contemporary visitors to the Winchester Mystery House represent a diverse range of interests and beliefs. Some come primarily for the historical experience, fascinated by Sarah Winchester's unique approach to architecture and the mansion's place in California history. Others are drawn specifically by paranormal claims, hoping to experience supernatural phenomena firsthand or to conduct their own investigations. The mansion accommodates these different visitor interests by offering multiple tour options, ranging from standard historical tours that focus on architecture and biography to specialized paranormal tours that emphasize supernatural claims and investigation opportunities. Premium experiences include overnight investigations and private group tours that provide access to areas of the house not included in regular public tours. The Winchester Mystery House's gift shop and visitor centre have become destinations in their own right, featuring an extensive collection of books, documentaries, souvenirs, and paranormal investigation equipment. These retail offerings allow visitors to take home pieces of the Winchester experience, while also supporting the ongoing preservation and maintenance of the historic property. The mansion's annual events calendar includes Halloween celebrations, paranormal investigation workshops, and historical commemoration events that attract specialized audiences throughout the year. These events often feature guest speakers, including paranormal investigators, historians, and authors who have studied or written about the Winchester Mystery House. The Winchester Mystery House's digital presence extends beyond social media to include virtual tours, online educational resources, and streaming content that allows people worldwide to experience the mansion remotely. These digital offerings became particularly important during the COVID-19 pandemic, when physical visitation was restricted, but public interest in the house's mysteries remained high. Modern preservation efforts at the Winchester Mystery House face the unique challenge of maintaining a historic structure while accommodating the needs of contemporary paranormal tourism. The mansion requires constant maintenance due to its age, size, and the California climate, but preservation work must be balanced against the desire to maintain the atmospheric conditions that contribute to reported supernatural experiences. The Winchester Mystery House's status as a cultural phenomenon reflects broader American fascination with the intersection of history, mystery, and the supernatural. The mansion serves as a focal point for discussions about consciousness, mortality, and the possibility of survival after death, questions that resonate with visitors regardless of their specific beliefs about paranormal phenomena. As the Winchester Mystery House continues to evolve in response to changing media landscapes and visitor expectations, it maintains its position as one of America's most recognizable symbols of architectural mystery and supernatural possibility. Whether viewed as a historical monument, a paranormal hotspot, or a cultural curiosity, the mansion continues to capture imaginations and challenge conventional understanding of the relationships between architecture, psychology, and the unexplained forces that seem to influence human behavior in ways that transcend purely rational explanation. Chapter 11: Eternal Mysteries and Peaceful Rest. As our journey through the Winchester Mystery House draws to a close, we find ourselves standing at the threshold between the known and the unknown unknowable, between historical fact and enduring mystery. The story of Sarah Winchester and her remarkable architectural achievement transcends simple categories of explanation, existing in that liminal space where human grief, unlimited resources, and perhaps supernatural belief combine to create something that challenges our understanding of how people respond to loss, guilt, and the search for meaning in an often incomprehensible world. The Winchester Mystery House stands today as more than just a tourist attraction or architectural curiosity. It represents something fundamentally American in its scope and ambition, a monument to the possibilities that emerge when individual determination meets unlimited resources. Sarah Winchester, armed with the fortune created by precision engineering and deadly efficiency, chose to channel her wealth not into conventional displays of status or power, but into an artistic and spiritual expression that defied every expectation of how wealthy widows were supposed to behave in Victorian America. Whether driven by genuine supernatural beliefs, psychological necessity, architectural passion, or some combination of all these forces, Sarah Winchester created something unprecedented in domestic architecture. Her house challenges basic assumptions about the purpose of doors, windows, staircases, and rooms themselves. It stands as testament to the human capacity for obsession, dedication, and the pursuit of goals that may seem irrational to outside observers but provide essential meaning to those who undertake them. The legends that have grown around the Winchester Mystery House reflect our collective need to find explanations for behaviour that transcends conventional understanding. The stories of spirits seeking appeasement, of supernatural forces directing architectural choices, of mediums providing guidance for continuous construction. These narratives attempt to make sense of something that may ultimately be beyond rational explanation. Whether these supernatural accounts represent literal truth or metaphorical understanding matters less than their function in helping us process the mystery of human motivation and the ways that loss can drive people to extraordinary achievements. Sarah Winchester herself remains an enigmatic figure despite decades of research and speculation about her motivations and beliefs. The woman who emerges from historical documents is intelligent, capable, and determined, but also private to the point of secrecy about her inner life and personal convictions. She left behind an architectural masterpiece, but few written explanations of why she created it or what it meant to her. This silence has allowed countless interpretations to flourish, each reflecting the beliefs and assumptions of those who encounter her story. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Winchester Mystery House is not its architectural impossibilities or supernatural reputation, but its demonstration of how individual creative vision can persist for decades without external validation or conventional purpose. Sarah Winchester built continuously for 38 years, not because society expected or demanded such construction, but because the act of building provided her with meaning, purpose, and perhaps peace. Her dedication to this personal vision, regardless of public opinion or practical necessity, represents a form of artistic commitment that few people achieve in any field of endeavour. The house she created serves multiple functions simultaneously. It is a historical monument, a paranormal destination, an architectural puzzle, and a work of art. These different identities coexist within the same physical structure, allowing visitors to experience the Winchester Mystery House according to their own interests, beliefs, and needs. History enthusiasts can appreciate the craftsmanship and construction techniques. Paranormal investigators can explore supernatural claims. Architecture students can analyze innovative design solutions. Art lovers can contemplate the relationship between creativity and obsession. The Winchester Mystery House's enduring appeal reflects humanity's perpetual fascination with questions that have no definitive answers. Why do people make the choices they make? What drives individuals to pursue goals that seem to serve no practical purpose? How do loss and grief transform human behavior? Can consciousness survive physical death? Do supernatural forces influence human activities? The mansion embodies all these questions without providing clear answers, maintaining its mystery by refusing to conform to simple explanations. In our contemporary world, where digital technology increasingly dominates human experience and virtual environments replace physical exploration, the Winchester Mystery House offers something irreplaceable: the opportunity to walk through spaces that exist nowhere else, to navigate passages that challenge spatial understanding, to experience architecture that operates according to principles that may never be fully comprehended. The house provides a tactile, three-dimensional puzzle that engages visitors in ways that no digital simulation could replicate. The mansion's preservation for future generations represents a commitment to maintaining mystery in an age that often seeks to explain everything through scientific analysis and rational interpretation. While researchers continue to study the house's construction techniques, historical significance, and alleged paranormal activity, its essential mystery remains intact. The Winchester Mystery House stands as proof that some human achievements transcend complete understanding, and that preserving mystery may be as important as solving it. As darkness settles over the Santa Clara Valley where Sarah Winchester once directed her endless construction project, the Winchester Mystery House settles into itself with the weight of more than a century of stories, secrets, and speculation. The hammering and sawing that once provided its constant soundtrack have been silent for more than 100 years, but the questions raised by 38 years of continuous building continue to echo through its corridors and chambers. The house sleeps now in the California night, its 160 rooms holding their secrets close, its 2,000 doors standing as silent sentinels guarding passages that lead to destinations known only to those who built them. The 10,000 windows that pierce its walls catch starlight and streetlight, creating patterns of illumination that shift with the moving night, while its 47 fireplaces rest cold and dark, their purposes fulfilled or abandoned long ago. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the modern world pauses in its relentless activity, and the night wraps itself around the sleeping city of San Jose, the Winchester Mystery House exists in perfect stillness. The staircases that lead nowhere remain patient in their architectural impossibility. The doors that open onto empty air continue their vigil over spaces that exist between intention and reality. The rooms within rooms maintain their nested secrets, waiting for visitors who may never come, or who may arrive tomorrow with fresh eyes and new questions. Perhaps Sarah Winchester, wherever she may be now, finds satisfaction in knowing that her life's work continues to captivate and confuse, to inspire and perplex, to challenge assumptions and defy explanation. She built a house that functions as its own answer to the question of why it was built. It exists because she built it, and she built it because existence itself demands some response to loss, some creative act that transforms grief into something tangible and enduring. The Winchester Mystery House reminds us that human creativity can take forms that transcend conventional understanding, that wealth can be channeled into expressions of personal vision rather than displays of social status, and that the search for meaning in the face of loss can produce achievements that outlast the lives of those who create them. Sarah Winchester's architectural legacy stands as proof that individual determination, given sufficient resources and time, can create wonders that challenge every assumption about what houses should be and how human beings should behave. As you settle into sleep tonight, perhaps you can imagine yourself walking through those impossible corridors, climbing staircases that lead to unexpected destinations, opening doors that reveal spaces beyond ordinary architectural logic. In the realm of dreams, where normal rules of physics and construction need not apply, the Winchester Mystery House feels perfectly natural, a place where creativity and impossibility coexist in harmony. Let the mystery of Sarah Winchester's creation accompany you into peaceful rest, knowing that some questions are more beautiful than their answers, that some achievements transcend explanation, and that human creativity can build bridges between the world as it is and the world as it might be. In the quiet darkness of sleep, all houses become mystery houses, all staircases lead to undiscovered destinations, and all doors open onto possibilities that daylight cannot fully illuminate. The Winchester Mystery House stands eternal in its enigma, a testament to the enduring power of human imagination to create beauty from bewilderment, purpose from puzzlement, and meaning from mystery. Rest well, knowing that somewhere in California, beneath the stars that Sarah Winchester once glimpsed through her impossible windows, a house unlike any other continues its patient vigil over questions that may never be answered and secrets that may never be revealed. Sleep peacefully and dream of rooms that exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary architecture, where the impossible becomes everyday and the mysterious transforms into the magnificent. The Winchester Mystery House keeps its eternal watch over the intersection of history and legend, fact and folklore, reality and imagination, ensuring that wonder will always have a place in our increasingly explained world. Good night, and let the gentle mystery of Sarah Winchester's architectural achievement carry you softly into dreams where all houses are mystery houses, and every door opens onto new possibilities for understanding the beautiful, inexplicable complexity of human creativity and determination.